Moses represents the strict adherence with instructions that come through, that he channels through from the upper realms. And Aaron represents the flexibility.
Go to our website, which is HebrewLearningCircles.org. Go to Jewish Resources, scroll down to Parsha Videos, and you'll find the source sheet right there.
Today we're focusing on Parashat Sh'mini. Again, the commentary is by the Izhbitzer Rebbe. And let's jump right in. It's a fascinating discussion of the context for spiritual practice, for mitzvot, particularly mitzvot of the Torah, according to our tradition. In chapter 2, verse 19 and 20, we read the following: Vaydaber Aaron el Moshe, hen hayom hikrivu et chatatam ve'et olatam lifnei havaya, vatikrena oti kaele, ve'achalti chatat hayom ha'itav be'enei havaya. And Aaron spoke to Moses, see, this day they brought their sin offering, they meaning his sons, their sin offerings and their burnt offering before Havaya. And such things have befallen me. What things? Let's be reminded that just shortly before, Nadav and Abihu, Aaron's other sons, were killed while performing a ritual of sacrificing, actually of burning incense for God, in a way that was not prescribed. They're inventing their own way of doing it. They did it out of without being asked to. This was voluntarily, and they're killed in the act. A fire comes down from heaven, as the Torah describes it, and consumes them instead of consuming the incense. So Aaron's point here is that he is in mourning. He just had a terrible loss. And then Aaron continues, had I eaten sin offering today, would Havaya have approved? And the discussion here is Moses had been reprimanding Aaron's sons for again handling sacrifice not in the way that was prescribed, and that is that they burnt the sacrifice completely on the altar instead of eating it, and they were asked to eat it very specifically. So Moses is angry. Vayishma Moshe vayitav be'einav. And when Moses heard Aaron's explanation, he approved, and that settled the matter. So it's very intense, but also very deep. So let's see where this goes. So the Izhbitzer is going to relate to a few questions here. And one is, why is Moses being lenient and forgiving with Aaron, the high priest, after Aaron commits a significant breach of the prescribed order of the temple ritual? And the second question is, why was Aaron's explanation of relating his action or inaction, the inaction was that they did not eat from the meat of the slaughtered goat as was prescribed, but burned it completely. Why Why is Aaron's explanation of relating his inaction to the loss of his sons Nadav and Avihu, why was that persuasive? And the last question is the fulfillment of the mitzvot of the Torah flexible based on circumstance and context? So here's the Izhbitzer. He starts by quoting the last verse, Vayishma Moshe, Vayitav Beinav, which is meaning Moses heard the explanation and approved of it. Achar כך הבין משה העניין שיפה עשה אהרון שלא אכל השעיר של ראש חודש. So here Moses understands that it was actually proper, it was okay for Aaron not to eat the goat of the new moon sacrifice. So let me explain that just a little bit. The Torah is very ambiguous about what's going on, but in the Talmud, and Rashi, we have it elaborates on it a little bit. And what is explained is that there were actually 3 sacrifices that were prescribed for that moment. One was a sacrifice of the inauguration. They're inaugurating. This is all part of the rituals for inaugurating the tabernacle, which is the temple in the mobile temple in the desert. Remember that this is all beginning, right there. This is all new. God had just instructed Moses on how to worship, and Moses is now implementing. He's instructing Aaron and his sons to begin for the first time, the worship in the tabernacle, and they're beginning to implement. And as I said, his 2 other sons, Nadav and Avihu, had failed to follow directions precisely and paid the price for it, a terrible price. And what Moses instructs Aaron and the 2 remaining sons is not to mourn, but to continue on with the rituals. The show must go on, as it were. And he tells them that people will mourn on your behalf. Let the people mourn the death of the 2 young priests, but you continue with your duties. And immediately after, the 2 other sons fail as well, right? So this is the context. So the sages explain that there were 3 sacrifices. One sacrifice was the sacrifice for the inauguration. And that sacrifice they ate from. The other sacrifice was a sacrifice for Thanksgiving, and they had eaten the meat from that. But the third sacrifice was the sacrifice for the time in the cycle of the year, of the seasons. That was for the new moon. From that, Aaron tells Moses he did not want to eat because he was in a mournful mood, in a grief. And he says to Moses, would God be happy with me eating from the sacrifice while I'm in grief? Would that please God? And Moses gets it. He has a point. So the sages ask, well, what's different? You know, what's unique about the sacrifice for the new moon as compared to the other 2? And the answer is that the other 2 sacrifices were situational sacrifices that are done for a momentary purpose. So the inauguration is for this specific tabernacle, and it's going to happen once, and it's over, right? So it's momentary. The sacrifice of Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving for a very specific reason. It's going to happen now, and it's over, and that's all good. From that, they ate. That was okay. But the sacrifice for the new moon is a forever sacrifice. They're launching a process that will be eternal. Every new moon, every month, from now until the end of time, they will be performing this sacrifice. And Aaron's understanding, his epiphany was that he can't start this eternal process, in eat from it in the mood of grief, that would not be proper. That would not please God. And he made the call, he made the choice that not to eat from it, but to burn it entirely. You can also see the connection to his maybe his two sons, that they were burned. This is some kind of remedy, some kind of correction, for that. And then we'll get, there's another point that we're going to get to. I'm going to put a check on that and get to that a little further. But the point is that the difference is that a sacrifice that is forever should not be eaten from in a mood that's less than conscious, full presence, joy, fullness. Ach, nifla beinav, meichan dan Aaron kach. But still Moses wondered, how did Aaron, even if he was right, how did he make that choice? After he was told specifically, and here Moses is, the Izhbitzer is repeating the verse, the specific words of Moses. You shall definitely eat the sacrifice in a sacred place as I have instructed. Ad she'heshiv lo Aaron mi'inyan Nadav ve'Avihu. But when Aaron has connected connected his choice specifically to his sons, to Nadav and Avihu. So it's not that generally we don't do this when we are in grief. If he was in grief that was related to anybody else, Moses would have not accepted his explanation. But specifically because he connected this grief to the death of his sons, Nadav and Avihu, that persuaded Moses. Uvazeh ha'inyan nimtza amkut gadol. Why? Because the story of Nadav and Avihu has great depth, has a specific, essential depth to that event. And what is it? Ki se'ir rosh chodesh romez lehava'at kapara al meitut hayareach. Okay, and he says because the goat that is sacrificed for the new moon is related to atonement for the smallness of the moon. What does the smallness of the moon have to do with this? And here I want to read commentary by the translator, and you will see that if you go to the source sheet. The first dispute in creation, in the world, you could say that the original ever dispute is the dispute between the sun and the moon. Why? This is a commentary now on the story of creation, right? So the fourth day of creation, and out of the 6 days, are the creation of the sun and the moon and the stars. And they're called the great luminaries. But then God says the large luminary is the sun and the small luminary is the moon. And the Midrash, the commentary, explains why. So the moon asserted 2 kings cannot wear the same crown. So God told the moon, okay, if you think that you and the sun cannot be equal rulers over the heavens, go and reduce yourself. This is, as it were, the introduction of dispute into the world. It's the first time that we have a disharmony or a dispute between two entities. Useir Rosh Chodesh Harishon Nisraf. So the first goat of the new moon was burned, for Aaron did not want to eat it. And from here, Moshe understood until now, the matter is very deep. Aaron and Moses are like the sun and the moon. And Aaron does not want to be in dispute with his brother. So he's reducing himself. On the other hand, this is a sacrifice for something that's eternal. And the sacrifice that's for something eternal that is tainted should not be eaten for. And how does Aaron know that? Because of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu, the reason they were zapped, the reason they were killed for bringing what's called a strange fire or wanting to perform a voluntary burning of incense for God without being instructed, is interpreted by the sages that they wanted to probe deeper into God. They wanted to know, they wanted to experience out of a zealousness, out of a religious ecstasy, out of a deep spiritual desire. They wanted to know the workings of the divine forever. They wanted to see into the future. They wanted to know only what God can know. And it was that daring to tap into that which is eternal, to kind of plug into, to pull out of the limitations of the human mind, the human reality, in which we do have time and we do have space, and that limits our consciousness. According to our sages, everything that happens in time and space comes from an eternal consciousness where there is no before and after, and everything is preordained, everything is pre-known. Even though we're given choice and we are in a world where we have the illusion, the purposeful delusion of choice, that is a limitation, because we have no idea which choice is the right one. And the act of Nadav and Avihu was trying to peek beyond the veil. They were just taught this technology of connecting with, and the technology is a sacrifice, the incense, the burning of foods. In fact, just to put this in context, all sacrifice had to do with the olfactory. This is not about the meat. God does not eat meat, does not want the meat. The sacrifice of meat, the sacrifice of the burning of meat, the burning of poultry, the burning of meals, of bread, the burning of oil, all the different elements that are specifically instructed for the ritual sacrifices on the altars, and the burning of incense. The only purpose was to burn and create vapor and smoke, right, that would rise up to the heavens. The whole technology of sacrifice was to offer an olfactory experience, the smell, the sense, up to the heavens. And you can imagine if you look at, at cosmology, the way humans must have processed their relationship to the heaven at that time. The only thing other than birds that really rose to the heaven, the only thing that had that mystical in between the worlds kind of texture to it was smoke. So the burning of animals was not a barbecue for the sake of feeding God or feeding ourselves, or it was for the sake of producing the scents, right? The different smells and the smoke that just rises and offers a gift to the creator, to their sense of their creator, which in their mind, in their view of reality, within the limitations of the science of their time, was up in the heaven. So Nadav and Avihu are learning this new technology of burning incense. And they want to take it one step further. They become independent. I want to say, if we can connect to God through this, let us see if we can connect to God even deeper and become godlike and have the knowledge, plug into the eternal and immerse into the eternal. And guess what happens? They immerse and evaporate into the eternal. That Aaron recognizes that he cannot offer his grief for this sin of corrupting our relation, our linkage to the eternal by partaking of the meat of the sacrifice for the new moon, which is the symbol, which is atoning for the arrogance of the moon. He cannot eat from that because this is an eternal sacrifice. And by not eating from it, he's actually correcting for the sin of his two sons. Moses gets the depth of that and yields. And you see that there's a correction of the disparity between Aaron, who's the moon, and Moses, who's the sun. And Moses acknowledges that they're actually on some level they're equal, and he's satisfied with that. It was a beautiful, beautiful, you could say, a depth of forgiveness and a depth of correction through a daring flexibility, a daring independent interpretation of the mitzvot of the Torah. The thing that I take that is applicable, I think, to our experience as spiritual practitioners and on the Jewish path is that Moses represents the strict adherence with instructions that come through, that he channels through from the upper realms. And Aaron represents the flexibility, the contextual, the circumstantial and the contextual modifying elements for that. And the tension, since we're born, we're in the tension between the external adherence to the external rules and a loyalty, a need, an imperative to also listen to the internal judgment of the moment that's influenced by unique context and circumstance, like grief, for instance. May we be blessed with that kind of discernment. Shalom for now.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Again, click subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything. We really appreciate that. Like to have that extra layer of connection with you. Like and subscribe. Come back.
boises ahavo Mayim rabim lo yuklu